Cody, I'm so happy you asked this question because it kind of made me realize that, or I guess Mike too, that there could be a lot of people out there thinking that, I'm out in the middle of nowhere in Kansas or whatever, I can't be a pilot, whatever. God, what a backwards way to think about stuff. I mean, I do not chase this down because of that. Hello, aviators. Welcome back to the Pro Pilot Playbook podcast, where we bring you all the tips, tricks, hacks, and shortcuts to enable you to become a pilot faster and cheaper. I'm Sean Ritchie.
And I'm Mike Martin.
And we're back again with another episode here. This one is, this question came in. We actually got an email, another listener question here, asking this specific question. It made me realize that, there could be some misconceptions out there about what people think of, being a pilot. I don't even live by a big airport. The closest airport to me is blah, 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 or whatever. And, that's a huge misconception. Not many airline pilots live, if you fly for Delta Airlines, some of those guys live in Atlanta. But, some of them may live out in the middle of nowhere in Kansas. So we're going to talk a little bit about commuting to your job as a pilot on this episode. So, Mike, you got, I think you got the email pulled up there, or what? You're about to probably tell some story about, well, never mind. Let's talk.
No, I'll spare you. But no, great email. It really caught our eye. It came in on Sunday from Cody DeVillibus. The title of the email is, "How far can you live from an airport and still be hired?" Hi, Mike and Sean. I really enjoy the podcast so far. Lots of great information. My question for you guys is, how close to an airport do I need to live in order to get a job for an airline? I live 2 hours from Springfield, Missouri, 4 hours from St. Louis, Missouri, and 3 hours from Little Rock, Arkansas. There are some very small municipal airports near me, but I'm not sure what my options are. I am currently a teacher and looking for a career change, as it's always been a dream of mine to be a pilot. And also financially, my wife and I could use a better income for me. My wife is in healthcare and does travel contracts and would love to be able to afford to come home and work locally. Even if that meant I might have to be away from home more, I wouldn't mind that as well. We just finished building our house and we have a pretty big mortgage, so moving is pretty unrealistic possibly at this point. I am curious if this is something worth pursuing and what my options I might have in aviation. Thank you for your time, guys. Really appreciate the podcast. So, this is a big deal because moving is a huge obstacle for any person when they're pursuing a career, and there's probably a lot of people watching and they're like, well, that's all great. If you live in New York or LA or somewhere like that, I mean, I'm sure there's lots of opportunities for corporate jobs and airline jobs and everything, but I'm, wherever I'm at, just like you said. So, the big thing, Sean was an airline pilot himself. He worked in the 121 world for years. He did not live where he was based. So I'll let you, kind of describe that as from an airline pilot's perspective.
Sure. Yeah. Very few guys flying for the airlines live where they work. It's kind of, it's one of the benefits of being a professional pilot, or at least in the 121 world, being a 121 airline pilot is the travel benefits, not just for yourself, but for your spouse, for your kids. If you don't have a spouse, you can, they call it electing a domestic partner, or just what every airline may call that something different. But basically, if you have a live-in significant other, you can deem them your domestic partner and they would have the same travel benefits as your spouse. But you as the employee have a higher priority of getting on, the airline. Basically, what we're talking about here is they call it flying standby or space available. So you would, if you're trying to go to work, you would show up at the airport, get on the flight going to your destination. And if any open seat on that airplane, you would get and fly in the highest priority, higher than some other employee's spouse or somebody flying on what they call a buddy pass, which you also get to give to friends and family.
Yeah.
But as a pilot, you even get the added benefit of actually flying in the jump seat, they call it. So every one of these bigger jets, even some of the corporate jets Mike and I fly, have something called a jump seat, which is a third seat in the cockpit in between the pilot and co-pilot that'll usually slide out of the wall, or it's in the back and you can attach it. This is built in there for people who may be observing you during the flight, like an FAA guy or an examiner of some fashion. But it can also be used to move a crew member to work. If that airplane's full and there are no seats in the back, you can always jump seat and ride in the cockpit with the rest of the crew. I've done that many times. So I flew for an airline out of Atlanta, Georgia, and I live in Cincinnati, Ohio. So I commuted regularly back and forth. Even when I was on reserve, which is those of you wanting to be airline pilots, that's the time right after you're hired and you don't have a line, so to say, which is what we call the schedule that you get every 30 days of what you're flying. Reserve is the guy who's sitting around the air. There's different forms of reserve. One of them is you got to like hot standby reserve. You're sitting at the airport all day waiting for, if somebody calls in sick, crew scheduling will call you and say, hey, get over to the gate, blah, blah, blah. You're going to whatever, Kansas, because this guy's sick. There's also forms of reserve where there's a 6-hour call out or 12-hour call out. Every airline does that different. But even when I was on that new hire reserve, I would get on and I had to be at the airport, whatever, sitting there ready to go. I would get on an airline that morning in Cincinnati, fly down to Atlanta, sit around all day. Maybe I would fly a trip, maybe I wouldn't. And then I would get on the last flight home back to Cincinnati. I wouldn't even stay in Atlanta. I had a pretty easy commute. There's some that wouldn't be that easy, but some guys would commute in and they would have a crash pad, which is basically a house. Some clever pilot in Atlanta puts together, gets a rental house or owns the house, and he rents it out to like 25 guys, 25 pilots who all pay, some minimal amount a month to have access to this house, which is just basically filled with cots and beds and whatever. And, you go over there and you sleep for a night and then you catch your flight the next day or something. It's cheaper than a hotel is the idea. But commuting is,
plus you get hotel discounts too anyway.
Oh yeah. You do. And typically, depending on the situation in the airline, usually pilots are walking around with a whole bunch of hotel points in their account. I mean, I got enough Hilton and Marriott points myself. I could co-sign for somebody for something. But the commuting is very common and it's easy. There's even stuff you can do if you have a sim event. The company is trying to get you in there because it's your 6 months, you got to get back in the sim. That stuff wouldn't even be space available. They would actually issue you travel. You would have a ticket, so in a seat. So that even gets into, they know that 3/4 of their guys commute for work. So your actual question though, how far away? This gets into specific company policy. You said that Springfield is 2 hours away from you. And there is airline service into Springfield. I would say you're probably right about the limit. I think if the companies that do make rules on it, how far away you can be, 2 hours, a 2-hour drive is usually the go-to that I've seen with companies.
Wouldn't though, how would they know doesn't it, like, you bid a 4-day trip, you're based in New York and you live in the middle of Missouri, rural Missouri in the Ozarks or whatever, and your trip starts on Tuesday, don't they they don't care if you're on the moon, right? As long as you're there when your trip starts, right? Is this in regards to being on reserve and things like that, or how?
Yeah, well, so it depends. That's what I was saying. Every company's going to handle this differently.
Okay.
No, I've seen it to where if you're going to be one of these guys that commute, that it actually says something 2 hours. Some of the 2 hours from a major airport, airport with airline service. I shouldn't say major, an airport with airline service. Mike, there are things concerning the reserve, some of that like hot reserve sitting at the airport or whatever. Some of that stuff dictates that you have to be within 2 hours of whatever airport that you're
Oh, I
sitting
gotcha.
reserve at.
That makes sense.
So if you're based in Detroit, Michigan, and you're sitting reserve in Detroit, and you don't want to sit at the airport all day, there could be something they dictate that says, all right, well, if you're roaming around town here, we need you within 2 hours of the airport. You have a 2 hour call out. There is that stuff too.
I gotcha.
Yeah. But
so it's a little rough. Commuting would be for Cody early on, because if he was bidding reserve, he would not have a set schedule, right? So
right, exactly. You got to know that going in. To say that I'm not going to chase down a career as a professional pilot because I'm concerned where my house is compared to where I'll work is ridiculous. I would never ever take that into consideration. Is it going to be a little bit more of a pain in the butt if I'm 2 hours away from my nearest city with airline service, Springfield, Missouri, which may not even have that great of, choices airline wise? Yeah, it's going to be a little bit more of a challenge, but at some point in your career, you're not going to care about selling that house or what that mortgage is. And, especially if your spouse is able to, work anywhere in the medical career field, you can go anywhere and have a job.
Right.
Everybody has a hospital or something like that. But yes, in the very beginning of your career, no matter where you live, I don't care if you fly for Delta Airlines and you live in Atlanta, Georgia, that first year of, I would say about a year, it's getting less and less. Some of these regionals, it's, a couple months and you got a line, but any of that reserve status stuff is, it's just something you got to go through in this industry.
Right. And with this hiring boom, it's quick, right? I mean, because they're hiring so many pilots, you're not.
Right. Yeah. And they've gotten good at it. They realize that this is, well, you got the unions and whatever. They realize this is something guys don't like. It's a, it puts a strain on your family and your lifestyle. So they have stuff now that's, and I forget what we called it. It had a fancy name, and every airline calls it something different anyway. But there's a thing in between reserve and actually having a line. Back to that real quick. That's something you would bid on each month. They release all the lines. Some of them are, you fly 2 days a week. Some of them are, you fly 5 days that week, but they're all out and backs. Or some of them you do like 1 3-day trip. You're off for 3 days and then you fly a 2-day trip. Everything's built out different. Some guys bid their lines on what cities they want to go to. I like that Corpus Christi flight because I got a buddy down there, so he always bids that Corpus Christi flight. There's stuff like that. And based on your seniority, you put in bids for what trips you want, what lines you want for the month. And based on your seniority, you either get it, your first choice or your second choice, third choice. And that's the same way for becoming a captain too. There'll be so many slots open for captain that month coming up. And you can see from last month, the seniority numbers that got captain, and, bounce that off your seniority number and you'll realize whether you got a chance or not to get it. But yeah. So anyway, in between, there's something in between full on reserve and having a line. And you have a line each month in this little thing they created, but it's just, they use these to put together all the loose ends of the other lines that didn't connect because some pilot's taking vacation or they're starting new service here in this city and it's only 3 days a week. So we need somebody to fill in this. They've got it figured out that it's a lot quicker than it used to be. Especially with just how fast everything's moving. Guys are upgrading and moving on. And
right. So
Yeah.
yeah, well, what a great question. So he's totally good there on the air. Obviously as he progresses in his career, if he moves to a base, he gets hired at Delta, moves to Atlanta, he's going to have a better schedule, no commuting and all that. But it's 100% doable. I wanted to talk a little bit on the corporate side of things because he
Yeah.
mentioned that in the email. But so there's two kinds of corporate jobs. There's you fly for a company and you fly their airplanes or an owner, or you can fly for one of these big charter operators like NetJets or Fractionals, or FlexJet, or these are big players in the business. There's a bunch of different ones.
Sure.
So Vista, ExoJet, all of those actually work on a rotation schedule. So the most common rotation schedule, these airplanes aren't based anywhere. They just float all over the country, and they work 7 days on, 7 days off is a very common one. Like you might swap out on Wednesday as your swap day. So basically, you start your trip at some random airport. You have no idea. It's wherever. So the guy that's off, he flew into Van Nuys, his last leg. It's on Tuesday night. He parked the airplane at the FBO there at Clay Lacy, and then he got on an airline flight and he went back to wherever he lived. He's gone. So now you're starting your rotation. You've been off a week. You go to an airport. They buy you a ticket. This is not commuting. I mean, you have a positive space ticket, and then you fly to Van Nuys, and then you meet up with that airplane, and then you fly out all over Hell's Half Acre for another week, and then wherever you end up, Palm Beach or whatever, you park the airplane on that last day. You head over to the airline terminal, and then you airline back to where you live. So that's very doable for Cody. Those operators, be it Wheels Up or whatever, they'll have guidelines for their employees on what airports they have to, what type of airline service you need. But certainly, like St. Louis or Little Rock would be an option for him because it has reliable airline service. So he could commute there. And when you think about driving 3 or 4 hours to an airport where you work, it's not a day job. I mean, if that was a day job, you couldn't do it. It'd be terrible. But you're only driving there once a week on Wednesdays. So you're landing in St. Louis. I think he said that's 4 hours away. That'd be the furthest. And then you're driving 4 hours to your house, or in the morning, you're driving there once 4 hours on Wednesday. So it's 8 hours of driving. But you think about a normal person with a half an hour commute in the morning and the evening, they're driving 10 hours a week anyway in the car. So you're just getting it all done at once.
Right.
So it's yeah. I mean, that's a great option for him.
Yeah, that is an important thing to think about, Mike. You and I both did that at a company here in Cincinnati. Our schedule wasn't as good as the 7 on, 7 off. I would have liked that more. We did a 6 on, 4 off, but it was the same thing. They didn't care where you lived. We had one guy that lives in Denver, and they didn't care because they were airlining you anyway. Positive space. They paid for your ticket. And you were saying flying all over. Sometimes you get out to the airplane, they don't have a trip on it. So the guy could have got to Van Nuys, and instead of taking off and flying all over, he may have just sat in a hotel in Van Nuys for 3 days before they found a trip for him.
You're not necessarily working.
Yeah, so that's such a good point there.
And I love bringing this up because this is crazy. But another cool thing to that 7 on, 7 off, which are all going on, is you get 2 weeks vacation. When you're there a while, it goes even longer. But think about this.
Yep.
1 week is actually 3 weeks off. So because you're on a week, off a week. So you take that week in the middle off, you have 3 weeks off. So when you first start, you have 6 total weeks of continuous off that you can plan. Guys love that.
Oh yeah.
You can also in a lot of these companies modify your base month to month. So I know guys that live in Florida in the winter, and then they'll live somewhere really cool like Colorado or Maine or something in the summer, and have 2 houses, and they just switch their base seasonally. So it's a cool schedule. I mean, being gone 7 days is long, but being off 7 days is nice too.
Yep. Yeah. And Cody, I'm so happy you asked this question because it kind of made me realize that, or I guess Mike too, that there could be a lot of people out there thinking that, I'm out in the middle of
Yeah,
nowhere in
yeah,
Kansas or
right.
whatever. I can't be a pilot, whatever. God, what a backwards way to think about stuff. I mean, I
Right.
do not chase this down because of that. I mean, get out
Yeah,
there, take action. Rarely do we regret the things that we did. It's the things we didn't do that really
absolutely.
hurt. Those are the ones that hurt.
You miss 100% of the swings you don't take. And,
Yeah.
also, Cody, these rural markets, there's wealthy people everywhere. And there's companies everywhere that operate business jets. And when you live in these small markets that are very far from the airports, that makes the need for private aviation even higher
Oh
for
yeah.
these wealthy people. So if you're out near Branson or something like that, I'm sure there's some wealthy people or companies that live there that base a jet there for these reasons that you're talking about. They don't want to drive 4 hours to get on an airline flight in St. Louis to go to Fort Lauderdale. So it's very difficult for their employees to conduct business. So you'll find jet operators in these small markets, and you can network with those people, and you may be able to get a normal corporate flying job at one of those local airports. You just have to research it. And our course has an operators list that you can look at different airports and who's there and what they're flying and things like that. So
Right.
that may be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned Branson. I was just there
Oh yeah.
4 days ago. I that part of the country is really starting to grow on me. The Ozarks are beautiful. Just gorgeous.
Oh man. And that Netflix show, I mean, that made everybody,
Yeah.
want to get a boat and go down there. Even though it's really filmed in Georgia, though, I heard.
Oh,
So,
I have no idea.
yeah. Yeah, but that's a cool show, and that's a great lake and stuff up there. So,
Yeah.
well, Cody, man, we really appreciate the question. As always, send in your questions to us. The channel's growing like crazy. Pound the like button, subscribe for us, and we're working on new, bigger, and better things. I'm sure you can see some changes in the channel. We're going to add some stuff to our website. We're going to have some exclusive videos there. Check that out, propilotplaybook.com, and just continue to
all this
view
stuff
is a big thing.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mike. I'm just going to go ahead and do this. We don't do this enough. All this stuff Mike and I are talking about every week is laid out in a step-by-step awesome format with like 40 plus videos over 8 hours of content.
Right.
There's even extras and bonuses in there and downloads. And there's even a whole other course that comes with that Mike created called the Flight Training Jumpstart course, which is, an actual kind of how to fly an airplane type of thing of how the instruments work and stuff, that's going to save you time instead of paying an instructor. It comes with it. And the thing is off the charts with value for you. And there's no money. There's a money back guarantee and there's no commitment to whatever. I mean, if you are
binge watch it.
If you're starting flight training or about to start flight training, you would literally, for the price tag on this thing, be shooting yourself in the foot if you didn't check it out.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's and Mike and I aren't getting rich off this. This is like a hobby that we feel like we're giving back to, a community and an industry that's given us so much. And it's just kind of like I don't know, makes us feel good to do this. And and it's awesome to hear from you guys and hear how it's
the comments are awesome.
Yeah. It truly just blown away.
We try to reply to every comment. So if you have any comments, please leave them below. Really appreciate it.
But we got some good stuff coming up. Actually, as soon as I hit the stop button on this, Mike, I'm calling my guy in North Dakota.
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry, South Dakota. I said North Dakota last time on the we're gonna get the my buddy, the F-16 pilot who flies for the South Dakota Guard, to come on the show with us and talk to us a little bit about military versus civilian. He does both. And that's going to be a great show coming up here.
That's going to be awesome, man. I can't wait to see it. So, yes. Well, thanks for viewing, and we'll see you soon.
Yep.